Welcome to Pink Radio with Prestige. This is the place for you, the diva boss entrepreneur who needs quick tips on building your crave-worthy brand. This is your host, Nicole Doss, CEO of the Prestige Society, a membership organization for women entrepreneurs who believe in building powerful networks while slanging in their industries. So I want you to go ahead and grab your favorite cup of coffee and get your favorite tips right here with Prestige. Hey, girl bosses. Before we get started with today's episode, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Pray and Slay conference happening October 12th. This is an opportunity for you, the girl boss, to get access to all of the mini resources you need to help move your business forward. To give you some ideas as to what we have in store for you, we literally have a mixture of workshops and panel discussions where you get to learn from subject matter experts around the topics of public relations, legally chic 101, so learn how you need to handle all of the things with your business, from registering your business to trademarking to anything you can think of, to building monthly subscriptions with your brand, to understanding how to juggle it all and being most effective with your precious resource called time, all the way down to understanding how to deal with your finance, back to how do you put God in the center of your business. So we have different speakers, we have laser coaches, we have a DJ, we have it all. And not to mention, we also are going to give an award to our 2019 Pray and Slay Woman of the Year, Dr. D.C. Marshall. I hope that you can make this awesome investment in your business for a whopping $67 to come to this event that's going to be hosted in Philadelphia. So if you want to learn more about the conference, I encourage you to go to www.prayandslayconference.com and purchase your ticket today. Now back to the show. Today we have an awesome treat, and I don't even want to introduce herself. I want her to introduce herself to you guys. So we're just going to jump right into it. So can you tell us, who do we have on the line today?
What's up, everybody? What's going on? I am J.Nicole. So it looks like we have two Nicoles with you today. I'm J.Nicole. I'm from South Jersey. I'm from Lawnside, New Jersey. More specifically, I am a motivational speaker, an author, and a more recently podcast host as well. Just trying to make change, in the world and just play my part.
I love it. So the reason why I am super excited to have J.Nicole on with us today is because, one of the things that I love is when I go to an event and someone just inspires me to want to know more about their story, know more about their brand. And so J.Nicole was one of those individuals. I just saw her recently at a Voices of Expressions event. And I was just like, oh my goodness, went up to her. She probably thought I was crazy. And I was just like, I got to interview you. And she's probably like, okay, who is this person? But I am so happy that you have decided to come on to the show. So one of the reasons why I was really drawn to you was first of all, the name of the podcast was like, wait, what is she? She's a grief bully? I was like, what is that? So the Grief Bully podcast, I believe, is such a unique and powerful podcast, especially because of how you help people through dealing with trauma and grief, just like as the podcast says. I'm really interested in knowing, how did you come to this part of your journey? At what point or what pivotal moment happened in your life where you were like, you know what, I'm going to help people deal with grief and trauma?
Well, first, I don't think you're crazy. Just to backtrack a little bit there, I actually was humbled by it, just having you come up to me and be more interested in my story. Because again, for me, it could sound cliche, but my tagline, and a lot of people probably say this, I guess, to an extent, is always love and light. So anytime I'm done interviewing or a podcast or a motivational video or just simply my Instagram story, it's kind of just stuck with me for a while to always just say love and light. And that being is that when I do that, I don't necessarily mean my light all the time as much as I more so rely on God's light. So I feel like when someone comes up to me, how you did it in a certain way, it wasn't like a groupie status. It was just one queen to another, just trying to further the conversation. And I just felt like you saw God's light and was intrigued and wanted to learn more. And essentially that's what I'm trying to do, is open up the doors for as many conversations as I possibly can have around a topic that I feel a lot of conversations aren't particularly being had, especially in the minority community, people of color. So to answer your other question, as far as what essentially got me started here, unfortunately, it's experience and loss. And I've lost some people that have been very close to me, my immediate family, as well as a close friend of mine as well. And of course, other people throughout my journey. So I just found myself feeling like, we need an outlet. I am prone to therapy and professional counseling, but I know that there's a ton of people that aren't, right? So it's like, what can we do to bridge that gap? How can we, kind of take up that space in between someone having no idea, what they're going through emotionally as far as grief and loss, and then, advocating and getting them to the professional rooms that can really, really help them.
I love it. And, I think that the fact that you are able to identify that there's such a gap, right? That we have this missing link somewhere in communities of color, I think is really important. I can't tell you how many people that I personally know of that are currently dealing with grief, but dealing with it in their own way, and not necessarily in the best way, not necessarily in a beneficial way. I lost my father. I lost my grandmother. I've lost my brother, and I wasn't necessarily in a space where I could handle it on my own. So I got help, but I didn't even know I was getting help to deal with those issues. I thought I was getting help to deal with anger issues, and anyone who knows
right.
anger issues, because I'm a happy-go-lucky kind of person. But I was struggling with that space, and so it's really cool to see so many people in this movement now trying to figure out how can they bridge the gap and how can they provide these platforms to help people grow. So kudos to you and thank you for even feeling the need to be of service to help those. I think it's also pretty courageous because you talk a lot about your story, or the podcast episode I listened to was the one with you and your mom. And
okay.
The thing that kept coming to me was, it takes a lot of courage to be very open in such a transparent platform. And so I'm interested in knowing what was the thing that made you feel courageous enough to do that? Because a lot of people are afraid to be as transparent as you are on such an open platform.
Yeah. So one, thank you for tuning into that episode. And, I know it could have been a while ago. I'm not sure, but I always extend my condolences because I feel like sometimes, even if it's been a lot of time, I still want to honor and acknowledge that you had to experience this. You're fortunately a part of this club. I too lost my father, so I can definitely relate there. But as far as the courage, I'm just going to try not to get too emotional about this. My grandmother and my father, I lost them both in the last 3 years, and they were my dad's mom, and so they were family. And they were probably two of my biggest fans, if you would like to use the word fans there. And I just feel like I've always worked hard to make my family proud. And when I lost them, my grandmother first in 2016, I just had this burning desire once I was able to get myself together. And actually before that, I've always been a person that helping others has helped me in ways to kind of redirect. But more recently with the Grief Bully podcast, my dad, on his last days, we had conversations that were much needed. And I said to him, I said, hey, Dad, if I ever get stuck in life, what are some things that you would say so that I can, reference back? And he said, you're a winner. I never saw you lose, and never give up. And so for me, it just essentially propels me in those times that, I am a winner, right? And so if I'm a winner, then I have to be battling something. I've got to be fighting something in order for me to actually win. So that's where it's like, okay, cool, let's fight in this grief arena, because I know that those two people I lost would never, ever want to see me hang my head and stop my life because they lost theirs, when essentially it's a part of life and we all are going to experience it. So I wish it was as easy to get through it as I'm saying it. But, you know, going through grief therapy and counseling and understanding that you can grieve well, you can integrate the losses into your life. And so I just said, hey, you know what? I've been an open book. I've always been like this. Why not share this topic? There was hesitancy, but, you know, here we are now. So.
Right. Well, I think that once again, give you just thank you for just being courageous and really just, I think when we are transparent in sharing our stories, we build these connections with others who are going through the same thing, who may not feel as courageous to share theirs. And a lot of people are dealing with a lot of hurt in dark places and not sharing their hurt. And so I really like your courage is a necessity to help other people come out of whatever dark place that they're in. So I thank you. And I'm sure tons of people thank you for you being this courageous and tackling these issues where, you know, because they're needed in our community. So I thank you for that. So as, you know, you are building this brand, because this is really what I think our listeners really are focused on. I in case you don't know, I have a membership organization called the Prestige Society, and our goal is to build women entrepreneurs as a network together, as well as giving them opportunities to learn monthly on how to build their brands. And one of the things that I usually find is that when women build brands that are connected to something that may have happened to them that is painful, it's really challenging for them to push the brand forward or to be able to separate the hurt that they've experienced when they went through the experience versus now this need to create this. So for instance, you know, whether it's like a foundation that's tied to something, or if it's a nonprofit tied to something, or a book they've written about a traumatic experience, sometimes it's really hard. And without naming names, because of course it would protect my members, I had a member who wrote a book on a very traumatic experience in her life. And she's like, I can't publish. I'm like, what do you mean you can't publish? And literally I had to like get on a Zoom call, like a web conference with her and walk through the steps, not to tell her what to do, but to just be that accountability partner to help her through the hesitation she was having with pushing forward. And, you know, now it's awesome because she's a published author and, you know, people are taking pictures, holding her book. They're being so, you know, they're just thankful for her story. But I know that there was some challenges there in her pushing that forward. And I see that same struggle in some other members who have, I hate to call it a brand, but ultimately that's what it is. But, you know, building a brand or building an organization around something that is traumatic or hurtful. So, you know, what would you say was the most challenging situation you faced as you were building your purpose-driven brand?
Yeah, so I can actually relate pretty closely to that. So prior to the Grieffully podcast, actually not immediately, but pretty close to losing my grandmother in 2016, I started working on a children's book. And the thought behind that children's book was, okay, I love my grandmother and I want to keep her memory alive. And also it's good for me creatively as an outlet. And I figured a children's book would be good because it was like, you know, lighthearted, not anything really heavy or deep. I am going to write my life story, but just not yet. I don't think I've gotten to the place where, you know, all of the meat of it has been accomplished yet. But in that process, so the children's book is called The Adventures of Grim and Ladybug. And it's called, in the edition, it's Pancake Power. So I love pancakes. My grandmother and we had this relationship. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. Like, it's lighthearted, it's illustrated, it's fun. And I honestly found myself really struggling with that. So I had already put the book on pre-sale. So I was obligated at this point to finish it. Right. And I'll be honest, it took me almost a year, a little over. I had people's money and the pressure was on. There was some issues with the designer and her problems. And on top of me emotionally not really being able to face it and continue to deal with it. It was like, I don't really necessarily want to look at the pictures because the characters look exactly like myself and more like my grandmother than me, but that's what it is. So the front cover of it was actually how her home actually looked that we had for 50 years that we no longer have. So it was a lot emotionally tied to it. Right. That was very unexpected for me to actually have that. So that probably is the biggest obstacle when it's come to tying something that I personally went through to something as far as a brand is concerned and being able to push through. Nonetheless, we got through it and the book is been done. It's been out for some time now, but that was definitely something that I didn't expect to face.
Wow. Look at that. And so, but the thing is that at least you were able to see like the areas of that exercise of like trying to push that out, what was causing you some of those reasons, like holding you back, like not wanting to see the pictures or because that's hard. That's like a trick. Those are triggers.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And I know it's hard to push through that. So, thank you for sharing your story. And so not, everything that you're doing is not challenging. There's definitely some awesome, rewarding rewards or just these opportunities of feeling valued or feeling validated that like this is really where you should be going. What would you say has been like the most rewarding part of building your brand?
Well, I think the most rewarding part I will probably have to say is pretty much the fact that there are people who have just said, this is so needed, like multiple times. I had a conversation with a gentleman, actually. He's older than I am, big guy, strong, muscles, like African-American. And he did 10 years in prison, he himself has a nonprofit, but we're standing in the parking lot, after I was recording a podcast episode, and he had been liking a couple of my posts on Instagram. So I saw him and I'm like, hey, man, thanks so much for the support. And he's just like, we're getting into this dialogue. Like there's no difference. I'm a woman, I'm younger. He's a man, he's Black. He's been through this, all of these things. But we just were having this conversation where there was no differences, in our experience. So those are the most rewarding times for me, especially when it's males. Right. No, not that I don't want to empower or have, women involved, but like that's part of it is to break the stigma around our emotional experiences, and have those conversations. So I think anytime men and men of color more specifically have given me feedback has really been the most rewarding.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, because we put this stigma on them that they aren't to show grief, they're not to cry, they're not to do anything that may be seen as weak or because those are all things that are tied to more of being more effeminate. And unfortunately, it's not a gender thing. It's a human thing. You lose someone, it's traumatic, then there's going to be grief attached to that. And so I think that I can definitely see how, once someone from, the male side says, able to say like, thank you for this, or they can relate, or something you said touched them. It kind of is like, wow, like, see, this breaks down the barriers. Like it's a human
exactly
all going through. So I can definitely see that. For those, so here's the thing. I usually find people who tell me all the time they want to start a podcast, but then I never hear about their podcast. And so, being that you were able to start up this podcast and have guests and, really create this following around this movement, because that's really what I see the Grief Bully being as a movement. What would you say for those who are interested in starting a podcast as well?
I would say, for me, honestly, I had to pray about it for a while because I am more verbal and vocal, and I don't shy away from that. So that's just naturally my personality. But I just wasn't sure what platform would be best. And so I'm like, is it YouTube? Is it podcast? Like, is it another book? Like, what am I doing? So I just prayed about it. I looked into it. I would actually tell them to research it first, because I think that a lot of people think it's a lot easier than it actually is.
Right.
but it's also not as hard as you think it is. So it's like that in between. If you kind of have an idea of what you're doing, I found people that were actually doing podcasts on YouTube and Google and then social media. It's so much knowledge and information out there. So like, look at that. And they said a couple of things. If you're thinking about a topic, ask a couple people in your life, hey, I'm thinking about this topic. What does this mean to you? Get feedback from them. I would encourage them maybe do an episode or two that you don't, publish. Just, you can do it on Anchor or an app and just test it out and try it. But absolutely get started and don't look for perfection. Honestly, like done is better than perfect. For me personally, one of my flaws over the years have been inconsistency. So like I'll start things and then don't always finish. So myself, I actually knew that about me. So I decided, okay, hey, I want to get this done. I want to be effective and I don't want any real obstacles. So I came across a studio where I record actually. And thankfully for me, they make you commit for 6 months and you can't pay it in full because I offered to do that so that I wouldn't worry, but they want you to be more committed. So every month you see this coming out, you're like, all right, I have to go and do this. And so I think that's what I would say is just figure out exactly what you want to do, why you want to do it. And the most important thing I can tell you is if you're doing it for money, don't do it.
Oh,
because it's got to be a passion. It has to be something that you love and that you want to do and that you enjoy it and that it has a greater purpose bigger than yourself. Because I think there's false realities that, okay, you can just make all this money. It's another stream of income. Like, not to say people aren't monetizing and that there aren't ways, but if that's your main reason, then it shouldn't be. You shouldn't do it.
Right. I agree. I always say podcasting is one of the hardest ways to monetize because if you want to do it the right way, because there's easy ways for you to like attach a commercial to the beginning and end of your podcast. Like, okay, fine.
Right.
But if you want to be able to, like, I swear every podcaster has like, do you want to have a FabFitFun box? And it's like, okay, but you have to have X amount of people listening or, people subscribe to reviews that you have. And so you have to have a pretty large following in order for you to get that. And to your point, in order for you to get there, you have to be consistent. And that means that the money isn't going to come right away. And if money is what's driving you, it's not going to drive the consistency. So really follow the purpose and the passion first and let the coins come afterwards. So I definitely agree. And I love how you said done is better than perfect. I think that perfection will kill a dream because you're just constantly waiting for that perfection. And it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be the perfect time, the right time. I literally have a member who has a podcast and she told me she recorded 6 or 7 episodes and that she just doesn't like the sound of her voice. And by the way, the sound of her voice is absolutely fine. And I told her, you're literally stopping someone from being blessed by what you have to say just because you're afraid of something as superficial as the sound of your voice. And so if she had an irritating voice that would like hurt someone's ears, I'd be like, you should really rethink a podcast, but that's not at all the case. And so, it's, I love that you said, done is better than perfect. Cause I definitely think perfection will definitely kill a dream, kill action.
For sure.
And that's great. And I love how you use an accountability partner as an inanimate object. So usually when we think about accountability, we think about accountability partners as people. But what you did was you set up a system by getting the contract at the studio for X amount of months. And now you're obligated, like you're like, okay, I have to do this. I have to go. I have to record. I have to get content. And so I think doing that really set up this accountability system, if you will, like not as a person, but like as this thing that's going to force you into being consistent. So I am a big proponent for accountability and using those things as accountability, whether it's a planner, whether it's, to-do list, but something else that's going to keep you true to what it is.
Very, very true. I mean, for me, I just had to recognize my inconsistencies. It's like, I don't think I will not be passionate about this subject at all. I think it's something that it's just like when the things just align, you're like, okay, guy, like, yep, this is exactly what you wanted me to do. However, I do know how I am. And I didn't think it would happen in this season, but just to be sure so that this I guess I call it my baby, the podcast. This baby didn't die. I had to put her in the right environment to nurture. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to self-sabotage this dream. This is not going to happen. Like, people's lives, are counting on this. So what do you have to do? So you're absolutely right. I had to get that because, yeah, I can not go to the studio. I'll just lose my money. So it'll be on me. But I just was like, hey, look, I know you're going to do it. You have to be a self-starter, but just in case, let's put this in place. So you're absolutely right there.
I love it. I love it. So I'm interested in knowing, now that you set up this podcast, you're a motivational speaker, you're great at spoken word. What's next? Like, what do you see yourself conquering next?
Thank you for the compliment. I see myself, I definitely have another book in the future. I've actually started writing a couple times about grief, but then I put that on hold to focus on the podcast, which I thought was the better move right now. Mm-hmm. So I definitely see something in writing for the grief bully, or also have a closed Facebook group. It's called Grieve and Grow. And so one of my big dream, myself and my team, is to have the Grieve and Grow Center. So some sort of actual location where, for example, it's maybe a Friday night, Saturday night, you're like, I'm not really feeling the greatest right now. I know somebody's at the center. I'm going to go through there. Maybe we play cards, maybe we play spades. I don't know. Play a couple games. Like, it's not necessarily like for therapy and counseling. I mean, maybe that's a bigger picture, but more of like an actual hangout spot.
Right.
For everyone to come through and just be like, you know what? I know it's other people there that are going through the same thing I'm going through. We don't have to exactly talk about that, but I might feel safer just because I know they get it. And I don't have to be anything but how I actually feel. So that is something that I definitely have in prayer for the long term. And then probably sooner, I'm in praying about this as well. I guess I pray a lot about things.
Good thing, by the way.
Yeah, I'm like, I didn't pray. Well, my commute for work is long. So I spend a lot of time by myself in my car, well, with God, I guess, but mm-hmm. talking out loud. So the Grief Bully, I would like to have the Grief Bully mentoring program. For youth specifically, to deal with grief. So I would hope that I would have like volunteer therapists and counselors who are licensed on board to help provide support, but so that we can have that for grief specifically, not just, teens who are struggling, but just ones that have lost people. Actually, just today, I had someone reach out to me. She had talked to me about a 14-year-old who was going through some tough times in his life, lost his father, his mother is sick, a lot of things. And I kind of felt a little scared, intimidated, like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to say, to him. But we got on the phone and it was just like, listen, kid, I get you. I'm proud of you, first of all, for crying. You're 14, you're a young man, and, I'm proud of you for doing that. And we just had dialogue, and it was like, he told me he doesn't trust anybody. And I said, well, you must trust me. You got on the phone, So just that reassured the whole, youth mentoring eventually is something I would like to do.
I like it. And even for the centers, when I lost my brother, I was 21 years old, but, mm-hmm. And I'm like going to celebrate a 40th birthday in November. So that tells you, sorry. So it was some time ago, but I remember feeling lost. I remember feeling like, I was trying to find peace in other places. And I remember like hanging out with my friends didn't work, or, I would go, like, I just felt like wherever I would go, I didn't feel safe. And I don't even know how to explain it. And I feel like only people who go through grief understand what that feels like. But my brother was like my protector. We were 10 years apart. And I always felt like no one would ever mess with me because I was Kevin's little sister. And then, especially in that season of my life, because I was trying to be grown because I was 21. Like, ow. So, it was like, so I just was like, nobody will mess with me because, I'm Kevin's little sister. And then when he died, I remember feeling very vulnerable. Like, now who's here to protect me? And so I just didn't feel safe. I felt very vulnerable. And so when you talk about the Grieve and Grow Center, I like, once you said like, not necessarily, therapy, but like a place where you can just go where, like there's people who kind of like are going through the same thing you're going through, but you don't have to talk about it. It's just this, to me, the first thing that came to mind was it's a sanctuary. It's like a place where you just feel safe. And so, I think that when life is going great and you haven't gone through that experience, you completely discount how big that feeling of safety really, like what that does for someone who's going through all
Yep, very true.
So I love that that's, part of the vision and the plan. And, mentoring for our kids, I think is important too, because I don't think our kids really know how to verbalize what they feel. I don't think that even if you have active parents and parents who are involved, sometimes they just don't feel comfortable explaining those feelings to their parents. And so having mentors that they can kind of feel comfortable speaking to, helps, I think, a lot in kind of just getting out their feelings out there. So I think that those are, really great visions to have for the future, and best of luck.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, please do. I appreciate it. And also one of my goals, of course, this isn't so much my doing, but I definitely want to do a TEDx talk and a TED talk. They're like my big, 2020 goals. Like I really just want to be on a stage and more specifically talk about grief in the African-American community, not just in general, but how we have to deal with that, combating with religion and just like what we've, learned and been accustomed to. And like the whole, I guess, faith without works is dead concept in terms of like, I get it to be absent from the body, to be present with the Lord. And I understand this is the way of life, but I get that from a spiritual side. But what about my flesh? Like what's going to be the support and help me here? How can I get that here while I'm dealing with it on this side of things? So that's my vision for that.
Right. Yeah. I could see you doing a TED talk easy, not even a problem. So I think that you keep pushing for that, and you keep applying however many times you need to apply. Because I think that honestly, even the whole medium of like how you introduce the whole conversation around grief, even when you open up with spoken word, I think is captivating and it will definitely help. It would just help you a lot. I just think that you just have the formula already. So I think you'll be fine. Go for it.
You might have to help me with that. It sounds like you have a vision of how we're going to get that access granted.
I know.
So we're going to have to get my words
out because it was too much in my head of like how I can see you on this stage doing this with no problem. So I'm sorry. I was like caught up in in the vision that
you guys hear that. Your audience hears that. So when I hit you in the email, like, all right, sis, we got to get together and start TEDx planning.
That's right. I'm so for it. So, one of the things I am also a huge proponent of is helping people understand the importance of tying their purpose to their whatever their brand or their business is. And that's because I think that there's a lot of bad messaging out there. I like to call it the false doctrine of the entrepreneur. And I think that is that, in order for you to be an entrepreneur, to build a brand, that, you have to be completely engulfed or immersed into this ideology around chasing your coins or securing the bag. And I think we really missed the mark on you have God-given talents, and those God-given talents are supposed to be there to bear fruit, and to bear fruit not for yourself, bear fruit for those who God has placed in your demographic or in your market, because you're supposed to bless them forward. You're supposed to bless them with your gifts. And as you're doing that, the money will come, right? And so for me, I feel like anchoring your brand to your purpose is so much more than just saying you don't want a boss or you want a podcast so that you can get recognition, but it's more about how are you going to help move your people forward. And I always use the word, your tribe. And so, I see you as someone who is definitely heavy in a movement. I don't even know if you've identified it as a movement, but I feel like it is a movement. So I'm just wondering, so because you seem like you are a person who has this movement and it seems to be very heavily anchored in purpose, what do you believe, or why do you believe it's important that female founders or founders, period, do this very thing?
So yeah, I do think it's a movement. At least I'm trying to, and I like to look at it like, we're definitely trying to cultivate a tribe of people who this message resonates with. But I think it's very important because if you don't have, again, like I agree with you. I think that society, social media especially, is painting a picture of entrepreneurship, secure the bag, hustle, grind, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I've been in sales my entire life, pretty much, as far as like, not my entire life, my adult life, for sales. And, people buy a story though, like if you don't have a story, then it's like you will see through that immediately. Like the genuineness, like you can only, copy somebody else for so long. You can only, make yourself be someone that you're not for so long. So whatever, like you said about your natural ability, like whatever comes naturally to you, and that it's different for you than other people, like set your focus on that, even if it doesn't seem like, how is this going to lead to a monetary path? Like, how am I going to get from here to there? Like, a podcast about grief. Like, how many downloads am I even going to get? Is it going to be like 2 people? Okay. But for me, it was like, save one. If you save that one person, then I already won. And someone has ministered that to me a couple of times, like, hey, it's just about that one person, So when I first had my interview for the podcast, the studio, the producer there, he asked me, he said, what is your reason? Like, why are you even doing this? And I was like, I'm just trying to help people and save them. And he was like, all right, you don't have to say anything else. Cause I didn't even realize it, but I didn't even lead with anything that had to do with me. Right. And so I think that is very important. And I'm not saying that, hey, don't go after the bag and don't chase it. Like, absolutely. But like you said, your gifts will make room for you. And when you're helping other people, it's going to definitely come back to you in one capacity or another. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that makes sense or if it's absolutely a little rambly, but yeah, my thought behind that is you absolutely have to have something greater than yourself, a why, and be honest with yourself, because there's been times where I had to talk to my inner circle, and I would definitely encourage that too. Have people around you that's going to keep it real and tell you the truth. So I'm like, listen, does it seem like I'm staying humble, or is it like getting to my head that people are, saying these things? Like, how am I taking that in? Like, what do you see? And I said, look, remind me if you ever see me getting outside of that, hey, like, check yourself, because I'm a words of affirmation kind of person. So feedback like that gets me going, right. But I have to be mindful about it, so just being honest.
And what's interesting too, yes, I think inner circle is important. I do not like peanut galleries. I like people who are able to be 110% transparent with me as far as giving me feedback and giving me feedback upwards. Like, that's really important, right? So don't feel like because I sit in this position that you can't give me feedback upwards. Like, please do. Right. But I also think that when we get too egocentric, and sometimes we don't even realize it's happening, I just feel like God will find a way to humble you.
Oh, yes, he will.
In a way where you're like, oh, okay, let me take this.
My bad. Sorry about that.
Let me sit down. Because I think that's what happened to me, where my biggest thing was all about being this influencer. I'm so ashamed to even say it, but I'm transparent. Everybody knows I don't hold no bars, so I'm transparent. But I was so concerned about being an influencer, because naturally in the realm of like being a coach and, helping people, it's just in this industry, that's what you do. You're always looking for that partnership with that big brand. And so at some point, I was like, I need a publicist. So I hired this bomb publicist out of New York. Love, love, love her. Nakia McLean is awesome. But when I tell you, God took away all my money so I could afford this publicist, and like took away the money in ways like I didn't even notice it. It just hit me like it was happening over time, but I didn't notice it. And then when it happened, I was like, oh, wait a minute. It felt like a sucker punch to the gut. It was horrible. And it made me sit and reflect, and it made me think about, because I was so sad. Like, I felt like I was breaking up with a boo. Like, I can't, because I had all these great things. I was on TV. I was I was constantly on the phone doing interviews, whether it was for a magazine or whether it was for a podcast. And, she would call me and be like, oh, I'm going to be at Mary J. Blige's da-da-da-da-da. Would you want to come? I'm like, okay. So, it's like, there was just always this really great, everything that sparkles is definitely, diamonds and gold and glitter. And that's how I felt. And then I had to realize, like, wait. You said you built the Prestige Society to help the forward movement of the girl boss, to help in areas where she was going to be able to sharpen her business acumen and understand that power is in numbers through networking. So what part of you being on a TV show, What part of you being in this magazine, what part of you being on this podcast gets you there? And on top of all that, my memberships were dropping off because I wasn't spending any time nurturing my tribe. And so, because I was only focused on what I was doing. And, that was really for me a humbling moment because, unfortunately, I had to go through that to realize that what I was doing was very egocentric and it wasn't focusing outward on how I was providing the service to my tribe. So, I think that if we can't see it right away and if we don't have a team, because it looked great. So my team was all in, like, oh my God,
right.
You out here winning. I was like, aren't I? And it's like, no, you're not. Because winning isn't for me. It's not, I'm not here to serve myself. And so, I appreciate that, God also will sit you down and humble you so that you can reflect as well when you're not focused on the right things with your brand. So yes, it made absolute sense. You were not rambling, saying, and I could definitely relate to it. So thank you for sharing. So any last words you would love to share with our listeners, whether it's brief, whether it's around building, a brand, around podcasting, what would be some last words you would love to leave with our audience?
I probably would say that right now is a great time. Like right now is just a great time to do whatever it is you want to do. Like whatever you want to get started. Of course, here we go again. Take it to God in prayer. Right. Consult with some folks, but like get after it, like this is the time, like with social media and just the access and the connections. Like I can't even tell you how many new like friends I have that I don't even know if I'll ever meet them in person. Like I just have so many new people that I've met over the last month, I would say, males, females, young, old, white, black, doesn't matter. Like, this is the time where we have so much access, to do your own thing and whatever that thing is, no matter if it seems to you like, this is not, let's say like sexy, right? Like, I don't think grief is sexy. I don't think it's got that, it's not dressed up in that pretty gold package. It's like, but like the fact that it's like something that people want to talk to me about and that actually want to listen to it is like, wow, that's really cool. So whatever your thing is, like, absolutely don't have that hesitation and self-doubt because it could be that very thing that is needed from you. Like, that's what you're here for. Like, I don't want to talk about grief. Like, I mean, I do, and I'm learning to embrace it and enjoy it. But if I had to choose, absolutely not. Why would I ever want to talk about that? So it's just an example of sometimes it could be that thing that just doesn't seem like it will align, that will align. If you're dealing with grief and loss, I absolutely want to encourage you to tune into the podcast, but also to reach out and find the help that you need. I always believe that it's a professional level that needs to be taken care of. I don't know that your friends or yourself can handle that and carry that. Also your spiritual leaders in your life, definitely that's an avenue for you as well. But yeah, I mean, this is the time. This is the time to be great. So definitely connect and don't worry about competition, especially when it comes to podcasting. Someone told me this recently. I'll leave it with that, is that there really isn't competition because like our shows don't come on at the same time. Like it's not like, oh, if I listen to your podcast, I can't listen to that person's podcast. Like I listen to so many podcasts, like it's not even that type of arena. So, don't be afraid to reach out to other podcasters and get help.
Right. I'm a podcast junkie. Matter of fact, me and one of my vice president of the Philadelphia chapter, we were like, oh, we should do a podcast called The Rundown where we give everyone the skinny of all the different type of podcasts they need to tune into. And every week
that would be dope.
Just because we constantly listen to all these podcasts. Now, granted, we didn't take action. So we're going to go ahead and take heed to your great advice of, now is the time. Now is a great time. You're right. So we're going to go ahead and just go ahead and take action. But we do that because we literally spend the day listening to so many different podcasts. I mean, podcasts on building a God-centered business all the way down to like true crime. That's right. I'm addicted. Oh, I'm so ashamed to say, but it's like, it's crazy how many different podcasts are out there. And so
many.
To your point, there's no competition. And I never even thought of it that way. And I think that that's ingenious to even think of it I just think it's not competition because I always think in that realm. But when you put it even like logically in that manner of like, we don't even come on at the same time because it's on demand content. It's like, what? That's so true.
Yeah. Like, why wouldn't I want to share your podcast? Why wouldn't you want to share mine? Like, it doesn't, if your audience obviously is the same or like, you know, would receive it the same way, then go for it. Like, shoot your shot. It's no way to just be like, oh, I don't want to ask them because they might feel like I'm trying to take their shine. Like, how? Like, it doesn't make sense.
And you know what's funny? So for me, because I always look to help the girl boss, all I want to do is just give someone the platform. And I'm not even saying like my platform is like the platform you need to be on. I just want to give you an opportunity to have access to a different audience that maybe you don't have access to. And so I don't even think of it in that manner. And I think that's really why I reach out to you. Like, I would love to give you like to put you on my platform. Like, I don't know what it'll do for you, but I'd love the opportunity to do so. And I think that that's great. But putting it in that, like that specifically, like it's really no competition out here. I think that will help people understand, you know, just do it. Like there's nothing that's holding you back other than you. So that's great. So tell our listeners, where can they find you?
So I'm on both Facebook and Instagram, but I will be completely honest with you. In my attempts to be more